Hello dear students, today my topic is consideration and object. Meaning and definition. A consideration is one of the essentials of a valid contract. The term consideration means something in return. An agreement without consideration is void. The consideration is the benefit received by a party to the contract in return for the promise made by him. Pollock. The consideration is the price for which the promise of the other is bought, and the promise thus given for value is enforceable. Section 2D. When, at the desire of the promisor, the promisee or any other person has done or abstained from doing, or does or abstains from doing, or promises to do or abstain from doing something, such act or abstinence or promise is called a consideration for the promise. Examples: A. K agrees to sell his house for Rs 50 lakh to B. For C, the consideration is Rs 50 lakh. For B, the consideration is the house. B. C promises to repair B's car and B promises to pay him Rs 500. The promise of one party is the consideration for the other party. Essentials of valid consideration. 1. Desire of promisor for a valid consideration. The act or abstinence that creates a consideration must be done, at the desire, of the promisor. It means that any act, performed at the desire of a third party, or an act done voluntarily, does not create a valid consideration. Examples: A. C saved B's house from fire. B do not ask for help. C cannot demand payment for his services because he acted voluntarily. 2. Promisee or other person. An act creating the consideration may be done by the promisee or any other person. It is immaterial who provides the consideration. It may move from the promises, or any other person. It means a person can sue on a contract even if the consideration for the promise moved from a third party. Examples: A. Contracts to pay Rs 500 to B if B repairs C's car. B contracts to repair C car later. B refuses due to lack of consideration from C. C can sue B. Enforce the contract. 3. Act or abstinence. A consideration may be an act or abstinence. An act means do something. When consideration is an act, it is called positive consideration. Abstinence means not doing something. When consideration is abstinence, called negative consideration. Examples: Pa agrees to construct Q's house for Rs 10 lakh. Q's promise to pay R lakh is the consideration for P's promise to construct the house. 4. Past, present or future. The consideration may be past, present or future. A. Past consideration. When the benefit is received before the formation of an agreement, called a past consideration. When the services are provided voluntarily, any promise for compensation, the past consideration is not valid and they cannot get any compensation. However, if the promise is made to comp person who has already provided some services, then past consideration valid consideration. Examples: B found C's lost purse and gave it to him. B cannot demand because past consideration is not valid. B. Present consideration. When the consideration is given immediately by one party to another at the time of a contract, it is called a present consideration. The act creating the consideration is completely performed. Example: C sells a book to B and B pays the price. It is a present consideration. C. Future consideration. When the consideration on both sides is to move at a future date after the formation of contract, it is called a future consideration. In future consideration, the liability is outstanding on both sides. Example: X promises to deliver a car to Y after a week. Y promises to pay the price at the time of delivery. It is a future consideration. 5. Adequacy of consideration. It is not necessary that the consideration must be adequate. The parties are free to decide the value of consideration. However, inadequate consideration may create doubt about free consent of the parties. Inadequate consideration is considered by the court in deciding cases if the consent is proved to be free. Inadequate consideration is valid. Examples: C agrees to sell his car worth Rs 2 lakh for Rs 50,000 and his consent is free. The contract is valid. 6. Legal and certain. The consideration must be legal and certain. The consideration is not valid in the following circumstances: A promised to do something which is physically impossible. B. A promise to do something which is illegal. A promise to do something which is uncertain. D. A promise to perform a duty which a person is already responsible to perform under the law.